is better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. Emiliano Zapata. Zapata's strong belief in land reform stemmed from his upbringing in Anenagilco, where he was quickly involved in the conflicts between the villagers and the haciendados. His followers, called Zapatistas, fought for aggressive land reform policies to return land to the peasants. Zapata's main ideology for land reform, Zapatismo, called for aggressive land reform policies to be implemented by the government. When the state's needs were not met, revolutionary forces were formed, called Zapatistas. Zapata desired the establishment of communal land rights for the indigenous populations of Mexico, specifically in his home state of Morelos. Inspired by his upbringing on an expanding hacienda, he called for an agrarian reform on a small scale, which would in turn inspire a nationwide need for agrarian reform. He firsthand saw the problems that farmers faced, mostly associated with expanded haciendas or plantations. Zapata's primary aim was to redistribute the land from the large haciendas to smaller, community-oriented pueblos. His original aim pertained only to the state of Morelos, but he hoped to inspire countrywide land reform. Zapata's aims were not necessarily a jab against Diaz's policies, but they instead targeted Diaz's efforts in providing aid for his people. He used various methods to accomplish his aims of land reform. The main way Zapata fought for land reform was through his Plan de Ayala, written November 25, 1911. It denounced Madero for his perceived betrayal of revolutionary ideas and introduced Zapata's vision for land reform. It called for the immediate return of all land taken by the haciendos. When this was not accomplished, Zapata allied with Carranza in their revolutionary endeavors and took over Cuautla. Starting in 1907, the Diaz regime had begun to deteriorate and was growing weak and old, and by 1910, Mexico was said to be ripe for revolution. Prices were rising and wages were declining. The wealthy elites of Mexico weren't given the political power that they desired. Because of this economic decline, revolution broke out in 1910. Porfirio Diaz's presidency was threatened by an opposition force, Francisco Madero. Madero ran against Diaz in the 1910 election, but lost. Madero was forced into exile and ran to the U.S., issuing his Plan of San Luis Potosi. This plan proclaimed that the elections of 1910 were rigged and declared that Madero was the real president of Mexico. Madero called for an armed rebellion to begin against Diaz in November of 1910. Zapata saw an opportunity to promote land reform in Morelos, so he became Madero's quiet alliance. Madero made promises to the people about land reform, giving Zapata more reason to like him. Land reform was the one thing Zapata truly cared about. Zapata joined Madero's campaign against Diaz and took on an important role as the general of the Liberation Army of the South. Zapata and his men fought the government troops in the south of Mexico, while Pancho Villa fought in the north. In 1911, Zapata joined Madero's campaign against President Diaz. Emiliano Zapata and Madero overthrew Diaz in May in the Battle of Ciudad Juarez. The first Battle of Ciudad Juarez took place in April, and fighting lasted until May 10, 1911, between federal forces loyal to President Porfirio Diaz and rebel forces of Francisco Madero.
After Diaz was eliminated, Francisco León de la Barra came to power and formed a provisional government. Madero rose to power as well with promises to start land reforms, which were ultimately unsuccessful. Zapata was unimpressed with Madero's incompetence to understand and enforce land reforms. Zapata soon became suspicious of Madero and his intentions. Zapata's suspicions were confirmed with Madero deciding to appoint a governor to support plantation owners, leaving aside Zapata's persistent pleas to achieve agrarian goals. The Battle of Cuautla, fought only a few days after Juarez, was a battle between the forces of Emiliano Zapata and the federal army of the Mexican government that took place in the state of Morelos from May 13th to the 19th, 1911. It has been described as 6 of the most terrible days of battle in the whole revolution. In November, Zapata and Madero ended their compromises. Days after Madero became president, Zapata fled with Otilio Montana, a Zapatista general, and together Zapata and Montano formed the most radical reform plan in Mexico, the Plan de Ayala, on November 25th. In response to Francisco I. Madero and his plan of San Luis Potosi. The plan was a denunciation of Madero as well as a manifesto of Zapatismo and what it stood for. It called for land reforms and would become very important to Zapata's movement until his death.
It had the desired effect. Disenfranchised peons from southern Mexico flocked to join Zapata's army. It did not have much effect on Madero because he had previously declared Zapata to be an outlaw. At the start of 1912, Zapata's group of armed supporters had increased to approximately 12,000 men. Intense guerrilla warfare occurred in Morelos, and the Zapatistas launched an attack against the city of Yotepec. The Zapatistas also aggressively renewed attacks on the capital city of the state of Morelos in Mexico, Cuernavaca. In mid-January, martial law was declared in Morelos and many other locations as the Zapatistas' revolt spread. In early February, a tough government crackdown occurred in Morelos, where the brutal Juvencio Robles came to command military operations. Juvencio Robles was a federal general under Madero and Huerta who fought against the Zapatistas. Robles was responsible for the arrest of Zapata's relatives, widespread ousting of officials, and executions in Morelos, and the burning of villages and forced resettlement of populations throughout Morelos. Around the same time, the Zapatistas stated that they would block any train that entered the Morelos, such as the Cuernavaca to Tierra Railroad, which was blown up in January of 1912. Zapata's continuous problem was that although he could accomplish many small victories, such as the occupation of towns, blowing up trains, and defeating government troops, he was too weak to defeat Madero. Around early May of 1912, the Zapatistas ran out of ammunition. In fact, supplies ran so low that they resorted to their earlier methods of guerrilla activity. They attempted to restock through theft and black market. By mid-May of 1912, Zapata's forces, which numbered 1,000 rebels, encircled the government forces occupying the city of Cuautla just east of the capital city of Cuernavaca. This was an important event named the Siege of Cuautla. Government forces ran out of food and munitions and fled to Cuernavaca later. As a result of this successful siege, Zapata was able to secure Cuautla and able to block the road to Mexico City from the south. In late 1912, Zapata created a plan that would put the cost of his campaigns on the haciendas. If the haciendados, owners of the large estates called haciendas, did not comply, Zapata would burn down their cane fields. From this threat, haciendados began providing much money, which helped foster the revolution. This system had many additional benefits. Firstly, there are no longer tensions between the villagers and Zapata, as Zapata no longer had to ask them for funds. Also, by destroying the cane fields, the workers who were employed on those fields would join his cause. By the end of February of 1913, Huerta took control of Mexico and initiated a new offensive against Zapata's forces in Morelos. In April, Zapata captured the city of Honacatepec after a 36-hour-long battle. Zapata gained many weapons and ammunition from the city of Honacatepec. Zapata additionally set up headquarters at Tepalcingo, a town in the Mexican state of Morelos. In May of 1913, Zapata's men blew up a military train on the border of Morelos, and approximately 100 federal soldiers died. Zapata's troops slowly approached the state capital of Cuernavaca. In late May, Zapata issued an amendment to the Plan of Ayala. The amendment stated that Huerta was a usurper and unworthy of being the president of the Mexican Republic. Additionally, Orozco described as unworthy of the honor of being named national chief by the Morelos Revolutionary Junta because of a compromise he had made with Huerta. For the first time, Zapata officially assumed leadership, in contrast to Orozco, who had been number one in command up until then. Additionally, at the start of 1913, General Victoriano Huerta assassinated Madero and took control of the country. Huerta approached Zapata with a proposition of uniting their troops, but Zapata rejected his offer. This stopped him from being able to send troops to battle the guerrillas of the north, which had organized a new army under Carranza's leadership and were led by Pancho Villa with the purpose of defeating Huerta. Huerta was then forced to flee the country in July of 1914. On February 20, 1915, Emiliano Zapata wrote Pancho Villa and asked for troops and ammunition. Villa denies this offer and says it must be seized from the enemy. In April 1915, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, personal representative in Mexico, met with Zapata. Zapata asked that Wilson receive his delegation, but Wilson had recognized the Carranza government. The convention's government under Gutierrez had dispersed. July 9, 1916, a federal commander issues a manifesto to the natives of Morelos in which he warns that he would proceed with especial severity against all the state's pueblos if the people continued to provide support for Zapata. November 11, 1916, Pablo Gonzalez Garza issues instructions that anyone who directly or indirectly supports Zapata will be executed. Anyone caught on roads without a pass will be shot immediately, as will anyone discovered near any railroads. The year 1917 began with Venustiano Carranza initiates a new constitution, the Mexican Constitution of 1917. In March of 1917, Venustiano Carranza officially becomes the president of Mexico. Once Carranza becomes president, Obregón feels that his duty is done and resigns as Secretary of War. Obregón fulfills his retirement dreams as a chickpea farmer in Sonora. July 7, 1917, Emiliano Zapata rules Morelos, Venustiano Carranza rules Mexico, and all the fighting leaves Morelos totally devastated again. Zapata tries to connect with other rebel groups, including the Villistas, but without any success. Emiliano Zapata then issues a manifesto stating that Venustiano Carranza is a fake revolutionary and the fight must continue. Zapata asked Pancho Villa to sign the manifesto, but he didn't get any response. November 24, 1917, the Federals occupy Honacatepec. The year ends with yet another failure. The guerrillas are in the mountains and the Federals are in the major towns. Zapata was successful in the fact that his ideologies were in line with the people who fought for his cause and the people of Morelos. The Battle of Ciudad Juarez was successful for Zapata. He successfully combined forces with Madero to overthrow Diaz's army. It successfully led to the Treaty of Ciudad Juarez and replaced Diaz with Francisco de la Barra. Zapata was a successful and powerful revolutionary leader during Diaz's presidency. He captured Cuautla and blocked Diaz's access to Mexico City. This successfully increased support for revolutionary movements. An oversight on his part, Zapata failed to understand that Madero would not meet the demands of land reform made by the Zapatistas, failing to achieve the land reforms he desired.